Your furnace dies tonight. It's -40 outside. You'll freeze in hours. But a family in a leather tent with no electricity, no insulation, no technology, they're sleeping comfortably. Something about modern engineering got this catastrophically wrong, and nobody's talking about why. In 1977, a Montana blizzard knocked out power to thousands of homes. Temperatures hit -40. Modern houses with their fancy furnaces, useless. People froze in their living rooms. Meanwhile, a group of historians recreating traditional Plains Indian life stayed toasty in their tipis. Same storm, same brutal cold, completely different outcome. How does a tent made of sticks and animal skins outperform a house with central heating? Turns out, it starts with geometry. A tipi isn't just cone-shaped because it looks cool. That shape creates a natural heat pump. Warm air rises to the peak, hits those tilted walls, and slides right back down to where you're sleeping. Free circulation. No electricity required. Your rectangular living room, it's basically a cold air trap. Corners become dead zones where frigid air just sits there, pools up, stagnates. Your furnace fights it. The tipi shape prevents it from happening in the first place. And here's where it gets clever. Wind doesn't slam into a cone. It flows around it. A flat wall is like holding up a sail in a hurricane. Every gust pushes cold air through every tiny crack. But wind wrapping around a curved surface, it barely notices the structure exists. Plains tribes took this even further. They tilted the whole cone, putting the steeper side toward prevailing winds. More aerodynamic than some cars I've owned. Now consider this. A 16-foot tipi gives you roughly 200 square feet of floor space. But because of that cone shape, you're heating maybe half the air volume of a rectangular room the same size. Less air to heat means less fuel burned. The shape alone cuts material needs by 30% compared to a box, but shape only gets you so far. The real genius? A hidden wall nobody talks about anymore. Here's where tipi engineering gets really clever. Everyone knows insulation matters, but most people think you need to pack material tight into walls, stuff every gap, fill every crack. The Plains tribes knew better. They hung a second layer of hide about 12 inches inside the outer wall, just left it there. An air gap. Nothing fancy. And that nothing was everything. See, still air is one of the best insulators on the planet, better than most solid materials. The tipi liner created a dead air pocket that worked like a primitive thermos. Cold couldn't punch through directly. Heat couldn't escape easily. My grandfather used to say the best things in life are free. Turns out, air qualifies. But here's what makes it genius. The liner only went up about 5 to 6 feet, exactly where people actually lived. Slept, sat, ate. Why waste insulation on empty space above your head? Modern builders stuff insulation floor to ceiling, treating every inch equally. Tipi builders asked a smarter question. Where do the humans actually need warmth? Now the weird part. This system also created ventilation without drafts. Cold air entered at the bottom between the two walls. It rose naturally as it warmed. Then it exited through the smoke flaps at top. Fresh air constantly. Zero cold breeze hitting your face while you slept. When blizzards buried camps in snow, something funny happened. That snow piled against the outer wall actually added insulation. Meanwhile, the liner kept interior walls bone dry. No moisture, no ice buildup. Modern vapor barriers wish they worked this well, but insulation only matters if you have heat to keep inside. And the way tipis handled fire, that's where things get really interesting. Now here's where it gets interesting. A tipi fire was tiny. We're talking 2 or 3 small logs at a time. That's it. And yet it kept 200 square feet perfectly warm while modern furnaces burn through hundreds of dollars monthly trying to heat spaces 5 times that size. The secret? Location, location, location. Your furnace sits in the basement. It heats air to 120 degrees, then shoves it through metal ducts running through cold crawl spaces and uninsulated walls. By the time that air reaches your living room, it's dropped to maybe 90 degrees. You're literally paying to heat your ductwork. A tipi fire sat right in the middle of the living space. No middleman, no transit losses. Heat went directly from flame to face. But wait, it gets better. There's a difference between radiant heat and convection heat that most people never think about. Your furnace blows warm air around the room. A fire radiates infrared energy that warms your body directly. It's why you can feel toasty next to a campfire on a cold night, even though the surrounding air is freezing. Radiant heat doesn't care about air temperature, it heats you. Then there's the stone trick. Families lined their fire pits with rocks that absorbed heat during the evening. After the flames died down, those stones kept releasing warmth for hours, free heating while everyone slept. My grandmother had a similar approach with hot water bottles, though she never claimed it was ancient wisdom. The precision these families achieved was remarkable. They knew exactly how many sticks meant comfortable sleeping versus sweating through the night. But controlling the fire was only half the equation. The real genius was what happened above it. Now here's where things get clever. Those two flaps at the very top of a tipi, they weren't decoration. They were the world's first adjustable thermostat. Each flap connected to a long pole outside. One person could control exactly how much air moved through the entire shelter without even standing up. Wind shifting from the north, adjust the left flap, storm rolling in from the west, close the right one halfway. And the beauty is, it worked better in bad weather. Modern homes, the second power goes out, your fancy HVAC system becomes an expensive wall decoration. I've sat in a cold house during a winter blackout. Not fun. Meanwhile, teepee ventilation actually improved during storms because wind created stronger draft through the smoke flaps. Open both flaps wide and you get a chimney effect. Smoke pulls straight up and out while fresh air sneaks in at the bottom. Close one flap during a blizzard and you prevent downdrafts without sealing yourself into a smoke-filled nightmare. But what about extreme cold nights when nobody wanted a fire burning? Simple. Seal both flaps completely. With 4 to 8 people inside, you're generating roughly 400 to 800 watts of heat. That's basically a space heater made of humans. The small interior volume trapped all that warmth beautifully. Here's the part that still impresses me. Experienced operators learned to read smoke like we read thermostats. If smoke dropped or started swirling weird, a quick flap adjustment fixed it in seconds. No tech support needed, no waiting for a repairman who charges $90 just to show up. Pretty sophisticated for people who never saw a circuit board, but controlling airflow was only half the battle. The materials themselves held secrets that would shock modern insulation manufacturers. Here's where things get interesting. A single buffalo hide, R value of about 2 to 3. Not impressive. My attic insulation laughs at that number. But here's what the R value charts don't tell you. A complete tipi used 12 to 20 hides. Overlapping seams, double wall construction with that air gap we talked about. Suddenly you're looking at effective insulation comparable to early framed walls, and this was built by people using stone tools. The real magic was in the preparation. Buffalo hide contains natural oils that made it nearly waterproof. You know what destroys modern fiberglass insulation faster than anything? Moisture. Get fiberglass wet and it loses 40% of its effectiveness, sometimes more. Brain-tanned buffalo hide, water beaded right off. Then there's the hair. The hair-on side faced outward, creating thousands of tiny air pockets. Sound familiar? It should. That's exactly how modern synthetic fleece works. We literally invented fleece technology in the 1970s, thinking we were geniuses. Plains tribes figured it out centuries earlier using buffalo. And maintenance? If a hide got damaged, you replaced that one hide. Done. 20 minutes of work. Modern insulation requires tearing out entire wall sections, dealing with vapor barriers, probably finding mold you didn't know existed. Ask me how I know. But wait, it gets better. Brain-tanned hides stayed flexible in extreme cold. Bend them at -40, no problem. Modern synthetic materials, many crack and lose effectiveness below -20. The old materials actually perform better in the worst conditions. A complete tipi covering weighed around 150 to 250 pounds. Heavy, sure, but completely repairable and replaceable using only materials found on the plains. Now the ground itself, that's where the real thermal engineering happened. Now let's talk about something most people completely ignore. The floor. Modern homes sit on concrete slabs that basically suck heat right out of your feet. Concrete conducts cold like it's getting paid for it. You ever walk barefoot on a basement floor in January? Feels like stepping on a frozen lake. Teepee builders knew better. They layered their floors like a lasagna. First, packed earth, then dried grasses, then buffalo robes on top. 4 to 6 inches of insulation between you and the frozen ground. But here's where it gets clever. That central fire didn't just heat the air, it heated the earth directly beneath it. And earth holds heat like your grandmother holds grudges for a long, long time. After a few days of fires, the ground became a passive heating system. Warm dirt radiating heat upward all night. Free radiant floor heating thousands of years before anyone invented the concept. And they didn't stop there. Families actually dug their tipi floors slightly below ground level. Why? Because surrounding earth acts as thermal mass. It stabilizes temperature swings, keeps things from getting too cold or too hot. The sleeping areas along the edges, raised platforms made from willow branches covered in robes. This kept bodies away from the coldest air that naturally pools at floor level. Cold air sinks, so you sleep above it. Simple physics. Here's proof this worked. When a teepee moved to a new location, the ground underneath stayed warm enough to melt snow for days afterward. That's how much heat the earth had stored. Your basement can't do that, but ground heat was only part of the equation. The real secret furnace, it was already inside the teepee, and it didn't need any wood at all. Here's the part most modern architects completely ignore. 8 people sleeping in a closed teepee generated roughly 800 watts of heat. That's a space heater running all night long. For free. No electricity bill, no propane tank, just humans doing what humans do, breathing and existing. And in a small space, that matters. The average teepee held maybe 200 square feet, so those 800 watts actually raised the interior temperature 20 to 30 degrees above the outside air. No fire needed, just bodies. Now compare that to your house. The average American home today runs over 2,000 square feet. Same family of 4 or 5 people. But their body heat spreads so thin across all that empty space, it becomes thermally useless. You're basically heating air that nobody's even standing in. My grandmother used to say, "Close the door, you're heating the whole neighborhood." Turns out she understood thermal physics better than most contractors, but the tipi setup went deeper than just cramming people together. Sleeping arrangements followed a specific pattern. Children and elders slept in the center where combined body heat concentrated. Adults formed a ring around them like a human insulation blanket. And here's the clever timing trick. Families burned their last fire of the night to heat the stones and earth around the fire pit. Then they sealed the smoke flaps tight. Body heat alone maintained comfortable temperature until morning. Oh, and dogs. They weren't just pets. Each dog added another 100 watts of continuous warmth. That no dogs in the bedroom rule would have gotten you laughed out of a Lakota winter camp. Every warm body counted as fuel. But even perfect heating means nothing if moisture destroys everything you've built. Here's where modern homes get embarrassing. Your house right now is probably growing mold somewhere you can't see. Sorry, but it's true. Meanwhile, teepee dwellers kept everything bone dry in blizzards that lasted weeks. The difference? Airflow. That smoke flap system we talked about earlier wasn't just handling smoke, it was constantly pulling moisture out. Every breath you take releases water vapor. Cooking releases steam. 8 people sleeping in a space all night generate serious humidity. In a teepee, all that moisture rode the warm air currents straight up and out through the top. Gone. The liner we mentioned directed this damp air upward along the walls, keeping it moving toward the exit instead of settling on your blankets. Modern homes? They trap everything inside. Your bathroom mirror fogs up. Your windows sweat. That moisture seeps into walls where you can't see it. And wet insulation loses about 40% of its insulating power. You're basically paying to heat a damp sponge. I've seen renovations where contractors opened walls and found black mold spreading for years. The homeowners had no idea. They just wondered why their heating bills kept climbing. Buffalo hides actually breathed. They could absorb small amounts of moisture and release it later without rotting. Plastic vapor barriers in modern walls create a different problem entirely. Moisture gets trapped between layers with nowhere to go. Come spring thaw, that frozen condensation melts into hidden puddles. Families in teepees noticed something clever. Wet clothing hung near the upper walls dried overnight. That zone had constant warm airflow heading toward the smoke flaps. Free clothes dryer, no electricity required, but moisture was only half the survival equation. The real advantage came from something completely opposite of how we think about homes today. Here's the thing most people miss about tipi living: you weren't stuck. Modern homeowners, they're basically married to their mortgage and their foundation. Cold snap hits, pipes freeze, heating bill triples. What can you do? Put on another sweater and complain to your neighbors. Plains tribes had a different approach. Pack up and leave. A skilled family could break down an entire teepee in 15 minutes flat. Not exaggerating. 15 minutes. Try moving your 3-bedroom house that fast. I'll wait. Winter camps weren't random. Tribes spent generations learning which valleys blocked the worst winds, which slopes caught morning sun, which cottonwood groves provided natural windbreaks. This wasn't wandering aimlessly. This was thermal engineering through geography. A south-facing hillside in a protected valley could feel 20 to 30 degrees warmer than an exposed plain half a mile away. Same air temperature, completely different experience. And here's what gets me. If one spot turned out poorly, they just moved again. No sunk cost fallacy. No, well, we already set up here. Just practical problem solving. Meanwhile, my neighbor Dave refuses to admit his house faces the wrong direction, even though his heating bill could fund a small country. The mobility also solved another problem nobody thinks about: water. Melting snow for drinking and cooking burns through firewood fast. So tribes positioned winter camps near springs or rivers that stayed unfrozen. Less fuel wasted meant more fuel for actual warmth. Every decision connected to every other decision. Location affected fuel needs affected comfort. Comfort affected survival. But staying in one place did have advantages, especially when it came to heat that builds up over time. That's where things get really interesting. Here's something most people never consider. A teepee needed about 48 hours to really work its magic. See, when a family first set up camp, the ground underneath was frozen solid, cold as a banker's heart. But after 2 or 3 days of continuous occupation, that earth warmed up to around 40 to 50 degrees. And it stayed that way regardless of what the blizzard outside was doing. This is thermal mass in action. And modern homes have basically none of it. Your house cools down within 2 hours of the furnace quitting. 2 hours. Meanwhile, a properly established teepee kept getting warmer the longer people stayed. The ground literally became a heat battery. But the earth wasn't working alone. Buffalo robes stacked against the interior walls pulled double duty. During the day, they soaked up warmth from the fire. At night, they released it slowly back into the living space. Temperature swings that would make your smart thermostat throw an error code smoothed right out. Then there's the stone fire ring. Those rocks stored enough heat to keep the sleeping area comfortable for 8 to 10 hours after the flames died. Your fancy pellet stove can't do that when the power goes out. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Long-term winter camps sometimes kept fires burning continuously for weeks. Not big fires, just steady ones. The result? The ground became so saturated with stored heat that people reported actually feeling warmth rising up from the earth beneath them. I've slept on cold floors. Not fun. These folks engineered the opposite experience using dirt and patience. And this thermal mass principle connects directly to something most people completely overlook about surviving extreme cold: